What is getting in the way of what you want out of life? Take a moment to think about it and hang on to it for now as I share some stories with you. As a transformational coach, life is not about getting what you want out of life. Life is about getting rid of what is in the way. From my own experience, I know what it's like getting in my own way. I know what it feels like to hold myself back from a loving relationship. And I know what it's like sabotaging my own success. And I know what it's like resisting change. All of these are obstacles. And once we can identify our obstacles, we can let go of them. Because in reality, everything changes. And once you can truly believe that change is inevitable, then there is nothing to hang on to. Throughout my life, I have had the wonderful experience to help others overcome their obstacles, and thus now I would like to share 3 stories with you to help you bring this concept to life. Let's meet Diane, a very professional executive who is an extremely intelligent individual. However, she lived a whole life living in fear of mistakes, so much so that she was constantly making mistakes. Because of her intense focus on not making a mistake, she found herself tripping over mistakes all of the time. When we focus on what we don't want, we actually draw them in and turn them into a bigger problem than it is. In one of our coaching sessions one day, I asked her one simple question. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Well, she gave me this whole story on how she would put herself out there when things presented. She would be more courageous in her approach and she would take more risks. What are you really afraid of? And her response is, I am afraid of success. Well, I know this may sound strange because most of us would think that fear comes from fear of failure, but not in Diane's case, it was completely the opposite. Which led me to my next question. I was really intrigued with what was the fear about, so I asked her to elaborate a little bit more. And she said to me, if I'm successful in my role, I may have to move cities. And if I have to move cities, I would have to leave all of my friends and family. And in doing so, I would have to start all over again. As you can see, obstacles are an interesting concept because they can stop us doing the very thing that we must do to find happiness and success. And in Diane's case, the unconscious root cause to her fear was the resistance to change, which is quite normal. Neuroscience tells us that the brain doesn't like change. Most people resist change because it threatens their natural habitual patterns. For example, if we were to start a new role, a new car, a new boss, a new diet, or a new routine, your brain would have to work overtime because it had to learn to adapt to the change. The more ingrained you are in your ways of doing things, the longer it takes to create new habits. Let's meet my second client, Tina, who is a very creative entrepreneur, who is very much a perfectionist, to the point where she is holding back on projects and missing deadlines, and this was having an impact on her business. When we really break down perfectionism, this is just an ego-based habit and mindset, because the word perfectionist goes hand in hand with procrastination, which leads to paralysis. In one of our coaching sessions one day, I asked Tina, what are the costs to you and your business being a perfectionist? And Tina thought about it, and then she started crying. And she said, I don't trust myself, and I don't think anything is ever good enough. And I'm so tired of this inner drive to be perfect. I gave her the space. I paused. And then I asked her, what are the consequences if you continue down this path? And she said, if I continue down this path, I will be making myself very sick, as already I am experiencing anxiety and mental fatigue, which is putting stress on my body, and my emotions are all over the place. I am exhausted and drained, and this is just too hard to continue. So the next thing we explored was to remove the perfectionist and purposely start practicing a statement like, better done and out there working for me than perfect. Self-care was Tina's focus, that there is no such thing as perfect. This was a figment of her imagination, because the question for her was perfect in whose eyes, and the understanding that all humans have flaws. And the purpose was not to get things perfect, but more so what was the process and learning from it. Her motto became, the way to move from survival to success is 1 inch at a time. And now for my final client, Linda, who was a team lead for a very large organisation. And it was the HR manager who made contact with me to work with Linda, because there was some complaints about her behaviour and a lack of self-awareness. When I spoke to the HR manager to give me a little bit more insight into Linda's behaviour, she said, well, she is always opposing new ideas from her team. She attacks her team when things go wrong. She's hard to impress, and she is constantly getting into conflicts with other team members within the organisation. Mind you, this is something that I hear and see often. Let me explain. Most of us try to fix up the behaviour, and all that does is create more resistance. And in Linda's case, every time the HR manager would point out her misbehaviour, she would become very defensive. And if anything, it had an impact on her productivity and her performance. Now, the reason for this out-of-control behaviour is because the way she was showing up is an unconscious behaviour. This is Linda's blind spot, and it takes another individual to shine light onto these blind spots to make the unconscious conscious. Before I tell you more about Linda, I think it's important for me to explain the difference between attitude and behaviour. Attitude is the way that we think and feel, and behaviour is the way that we show up. So let's go back to Linda now. If we want to change her behaviour, we need to get into Linda's head to find out exactly what she's thinking and feeling about her role within the organisation, what she thinks and feels about her leadership team and her direct reports, because this will give us insight into exactly why she is showing up this way. I had the privilege to be invited to one of their team meetings, and it was the HR manager facilitating this meeting, and it was really obvious that Linda was not engaged. She was sitting there on her mobile phone. She had no input into the meeting, and if anything, her responses were negative in nature. Now, of course, the HR manager wanted to address her behaviour straight after the meeting, and I stepped in and said, whatever you're about to tell Linda right now, turn them into questions, because if you are about to point out her behaviour, she will deny it, she won't relate to it, and if anything, she will get her back up and defend herself. The HR manager thought about it for a while and then asked me if I would be happy to have that conversation with Linda. So, remember, the trick is not to bring up the behaviour, but what we want to do is get into Linda's mind to find out exactly what she was thinking and feeling about the meeting, so to give us insight into her behaviour. My first question to Linda was, what did you think about the meeting? And she responded, well, they're very repetitive. They never have an agenda. We never end our meeting with an action item. I find them a waste of time. So my next question was, how do you feel we should run our meetings? And she said, well, firstly, I think we should have an agenda, so they're on purpose. And then I think we should all come into the meeting with an idea that's aligned to the purpose, and then end our meeting with an action item that we can start our next meeting with. the HR manager was sitting with us the whole time, and she turned over to Linda and said, "How would you like to run our next meeting?" And Linda was delighted and said yes. You can clearly see that by asking the right question without addressing the behaviour and only using the two words that are related to attitude, thinking and feeling, that we were able to identify exactly why Linda was not engaged in the team meeting without addressing her behaviour. After a few sessions with Linda, it was very clear that her obstacle was a very strong inner critic, telling her that she's not good enough. You see, we all have obstacles. They are inevitable, and we do have control on how we react and respond to them. There are 3 types of obstacles that are likely to present along your path, and these are personal obstacles that relate to your mindset, behaviour and belief, those that prevent us from moving forward and prohibit effective decision making, just like Diane, and then there are social obstacles that relate to others around us, like those people that don't cooperate or sabotage us or are simply unable to fulfill the responsibilities assigned to them, just like Tina. And then there are those environmental obstacles, those unexpected occurrences, like the things that could happen when we're on our way for that long anticipated weekend getaway in the mountains, or when there is resistance within our environment, just like Linda. If we are able to overcome all of our obstacles, then we will learn valuable lessons that require us to achieve, learn and grow. Setbacks are inevitable too, but if you believe that everything happens for us and not to us, then you can shift your mindset into solving a problem and finding solutions. If we now go back to the question at the beginning, what is getting in the way of what you want out of life? Just like Diane, Tina, Linda and myself, we are constantly getting in our way. Whether it's that inner critic always telling us we're not good enough, or the fear of standing in our light, or the resistance to change, we are never done. Obstacles will always present. It is up to us how we react and respond to them. Obstacles don't block the path, they are the path. Thank you.